Good morning, everyone. My name is Kyle Gooderham, and we are Team 16. This morning we're going to talk about public speaking anxiety. Numerous psychological studies have found that Americans' greatest fear is public speaking. That means that we're more afraid of public speaking than we are of death, of even death. So to borrow a line from Jerry Seinfeld, that means that if we're going to be at a funeral, we'd rather be in the casket than the one delivering the eulogy. So why do we fear public speaking so much? What about it gives us anxiety? Well, it goes back to our primitive nature. When we were living in caves, when we were out in the wild, we depended on our pack, our tribe, our family to keep us safe. Being ostracized from the group meant certain death. So when we're standing in front of people like this and we have everyone's eyes looking at us, we feel like we're different than everyone, because we are. So we get this anxiety that built inside of us. We feel like we're being thrown out to the wolves. So we have 4 different techniques that we want to talk about today to help manage public speaking anxiety. Caitlin's going to come first and talk about what we like to call a bucket technique. Then Chow's going to come in and talk about practicing under different conditions so that you feel more comfortable when you get in front of in front of an audience. Then Corey's going to come in and talk about selective focus. And Jessica is going to finish up by talking about not sweating the small mistakes. So without any further ado, Caitlin.
Thanks, Kyle. My biggest fear about public speaking has always been that I'll get in front of my audience and completely blank, completely forget everything I worked so hard to memorize. So I started doing research about how to memorize speeches. And it turns out that memorization is actually not a good technique for giving an effective speech. Memorized speeches are not only rigid and unengaging, but they're really difficult to deliver. Any number of things can go wrong while you're giving a speech. A member of your audience could catch your eye, you could sneeze, or you could completely blank. When your speech is memorized, it's often really hard to find where you left off so you can pick up without derailing your speech. Instead of memorizing speeches, you should use a buckets technique. The buckets technique is anchored with a short, memorized introduction and a short, memorized conclusion. Memorized so that your key message is still delivered, but short so that you don't run into the common pitfalls of losing your place in a memorized speech. The middle of your speech are your main idea buckets, where you fill those buckets with thoughts that support your main ideas while you're practicing for your speech. But you don't want to write them down, and you don't want to memorize them. The idea is that you fill up your buckets enough so that in real time you can easily just draw from those buckets. Now that I've talked about the buckets technique, I'm going to hand it over to Chow to talk about the importance of practicing in different settings.
Thanks, Kelly. So now that today we're going to talk about 3 methods that's been working for us when it comes to practicing your speech that has been helping us and hopefully it will help you. So let me ask you guys, what makes you think a great athlete great? Some of you might say it's the talent. Actually, it's the practice. So the first practice method we'll talk about today is practice in front of a mirror. Oftentimes, we focus too much on the content of the speech or how to deliver it, but we never focus on how our postures look in front of people. So for example, if I never practice in front of a mirror, I would never notice sometimes my head can lean towards one side or the other. Next, once you practice in front of a mirror, gather a small family or friends. You don't feel nervous talking to your mom? I surely hope not. If so, grab a close friend. This is your safe space. They will provide candid feedback, either in terms of the content or the way you deliver. Last but not the least, the tip we offer is to practice at the actual location or in a location that's similar to the place that you will be delivering. That eases the anxiety of the unfamiliarity. You go there, you try to scale out the location, you try to figure out the technology, will you be using a mic, how loud will you be talking, and things like that. And now that we'll talk about the 3 methods, hopefully you will be using it later on in your future. And next, Corey will talk about some of the things that you can pay attention to during the speech.
Thank you, Chow. Like Chow said, I'm here to talk about what happens when it's game time. Caitlin talked about how to bucket a speech, how to structure it correctly, make sure that you get your key talking points. Chow talked about practicing, making sure that you are ready, practicing in the location that you're going to be giving the speech and other techniques. And I'm here to talk about what happens when you're on stage in front of 100 people, in front of 2,000 people, in front of 20 people. All of a sudden, all this practice could go away. You get a lot of anxiety with that many people signing, which could be extremely daunting, and that could lead to catastrophic results if you make a small mistake. However, a technique that I found that worked very well is selective focus. Selective focus really centers around focusing on one person or two people or an inanimate object while giving a speech in front of a large audience. What happens then is that anxiety goes away. Now, instead of talking to a group of 20 people, you're talking to John from class. Instead of talking to a group of 2,000 people, you're talking to the exit sign right behind at the very back of the stage, just like when you were practicing, like Chow said. With this, a lot of your anxiety goes away, and with more practice, you can increase that number from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, to 3 to 6, at which point you can start moving and working the room, making sure you make eye contact with specific people in certain sections to enhance engagement. And that really makes your speech so much more impactful, not only from a presentation standpoint, but also from a content standpoint. Now that I've talked about selective focus, I'm going to hand it off to Jessica to talk about not sweating the small mistakes.
Thanks, Corey. After you practice again and again, and you're planning to do the selective focus, a lot of people suffer from small mistake. Oh my God, what did I say? I used a however instead of but. I screw it. I'm a loser. And they start to sweat. My suggestion on stop sweating from small mistake is about expectation setting. Think about this. What do your audience expect from you? Do they expect you to be a seasoned pro? Do they expect you to be a language master? All they expect is a fun contact, an enthusiastic delivery, and on you as a person to be a normal human being. They don't expect perfection from yourself because no human being is perfect. With this understanding, you should actually set your expectation lower. With this lower bar, you can actually perform better. You can recover from small mistake and go on gracefully. So my suggestion on stop sweating from small mistake is about setting appropriate expectation. Now let's welcome Cal for a brief wrap-up.
All right, thanks, Jessica. So we've talked a lot about anxiety, why we feel it, that it's our greatest fear, and hopefully you guys can use some of the techniques we talked about today, whether it's Caitlin with the bucket techniques, Chow with practicing under different conditions, Corey's selective focus, or Jessica's not sweating the small mistakes. These are all different tips and different tricks that we can do to try and manage our anxiety. So hopefully the next time you guys deliver a speech, you implement some of these practices and keep working with them, because it's not always going to be the first time that you try something that it works well for you. With that, that's all that we have, and thank you all for coming.